Today's podcast is sponsored by Wine Access, and I hope you will take a listen. Vanessa Conlin is a Master of Wine candidate, and she has had a really fascinating run of it. She is now the head of wine for Wine Access. You'll learn more about her path to wine, and how it really affects the wines that you're going to see out of Wine Access. Wine Access has been a great sponsor so far, and if you haven't checked them out, I highly recommend going to wineaccess.com/normal and signing up for their email list. You'll get a daily email that will tell you about their current selections, and you can also go on their website and see what they've got in their online store. It is an awesome service, great customer service, great materials that go along with all of the wines that you get. You know, I only work with people I believe in. I really believe in Wine Access, and I hope that you will support them as they support the podcast. So we will get to the podcast, but don't forget, if you buy from Wine Access, you will get $20 off your first purchase of $50 or more if you go to Wine Access, ACCESS, wineaccess.com/normal. That's wine access, ACCESS.com/normal. Get on it today and take a listen to this amazing podcast. Vanessa is a very impressive person. Her wine career and journey is just remarkable. On the show today, we have Vanessa Conlin. She is the head of wine for Wine Access. She's had quite a wonderful and kind of unexpected career, which she's going to tell us about. While pursuing a career in opera, she discovered a love of food and wine, pursued wine education while continuing her music studies. Eventually, she chose wine over music while working in New York, and she has been the head of sales and marketing for a lot of prestigious wineries in Napa, Arietta Wines, Realm Cellars. Vanessa holds the WSET Diploma, was the recipient of the Niki Singer Memorial Scholarship from the International Wine Center, and she has passed the theory and practical portions of the Master of Wine exam and is writing her effectively dissertation research paper as the final stage. And the other thing that's really great about her is that she is the president of the board for the Jameson Animal Rescue Ranch. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Tell us about your background and how music wound up turning into a wine career.
I did not grow up with wine. My parents are both classical musicians. I had a little bit of an unconventional childhood in that, my dad is a symphony conductor. And so I would kind of spend after school and my friends were like out playing sports or whatever, I'd be like hanging around in orchestra rehearsals. And, my parents, they certainly weren't teetotalers, but like wine was not something that was part of my everyday life. They would have it maybe if they had a dinner party once in a while. I just grew up around music. I love music, not just classical. I mean, everything. Zeppelin is my go-to, but I just had never really considered doing anything else. It's just what I knew. And so, I got my master's degree in music. I studied opera and then performed professionally as an opera singer for several years. And kind of, I started to have my eyes and my palate start to be awakened, partly through like the travel that I was doing as a singer. Part of that was, of course, domestic, but I got to travel to Europe, and I just thought like, wow, there's just something to this that's really intriguing to me, because just through this glass, like I can learn so much about a place, like the history, the soil, the climate, what they eat. And so it kind of piqued my interest. And, with opera, there's a lot of, unless you're one of superstars, you do have some downtime. So I was in New York kind of between gigs, and I thought, I'm just going to go take a class on this. It just seems cool. And so I went, and I call this kind of, some people have an epiphany bottle. Like I wasn't that cool. I just had an epiphany clasp.
It was the whole thing, not just the bottle. It was everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I just was like, this is amazing. Like I had no idea how much goes into this, just what's in this one bottle. And I took like pages of notes, and I went home and I made my husband, he was my boyfriend then, but my now husband, I like sat him down on the couch and I like forced him to listen to me, like read everything that I had written down. And I just, it was like love at first sight, basically. I just knew I needed to pursue it. So I did complete career change, started at the very bottom. I took a job working on the floor of a wine retail shop for minimum wage, basically, just to be around the buyer and be able to taste and learn, and just continued from there. So I guess that's kind of a long answer to your question, but essentially it was something that came to me later in life. It just, to me, it's so fascinating. And I think coming from music, what really made me fall in love with it is it's another way to appreciate something using your senses. We live in such a digital world these days. And I feel like it's a way to kind of connect back into your body, just the way, like if you listen to a beautiful piece of music and it moves you and you feel emotion, maybe like the hairs on your arms stand up or it brings a tear to your eye. Like to me, it's the same thing with wine. You're appreciating something that's very individual, it's ephemeral, and you're using parts of your body that you don't use sitting behind a computer screen.
That is absolutely true. So was there any overlap between the music career and the wine career, or did you just do full stop?
There was a bit. And I mean, I'll just be completely real with you. I do really love music. And it was frankly like I was ready for this other career in wine. I was fascinated, but when you do something for so long, it's a big part of you. And so there was a bit of a struggle for a time where I was like, I was so used to practicing for like 6 hours a day, but then I also needed to be studying wine. And so I was kind of having this like dual personality that was fighting, within my own brain. And so finally I just had to be like, you know what, I'm just going to pack up my music and kind of say goodbye to this. And honestly, I've learned that made me actually appreciate music more. That for me, the way that I really enjoy it now is being in the audience, not doing it myself.
You don't ever feel like when you're watching it, wow, I really wish I could be up there, or I could do that better?
No, I'm more
just
like,
it's off topic, but I'm always wondering if that's how people feel.
No, I used to, when I was singing, I'd be like, wow, how did she hit that high C? Like, I need to know that, and now I'm just like, I'm so glad that's not me.
So did drinking wine do anything to your voice when you were singing?
Well, yes. And I mean, that's part of the thing also that I love about wine is, particularly as an opera singer, you're using your body as a microphone essentially, because we don't use amplification. And so like people in that career have to be very careful. It's all about, of course, like not getting sick.
Also, you can't eat certain things, right? Isn't dairy kind of off limits before shows and things?
Oh yeah. I mean, the list goes on. Dairy because it's going to cause phlegm, and caffeine because it'll dry you out, or spicy food because you're going to have reflux. And certainly alcohol was on that list. But
okay.
It's a very isolated lifestyle, really, when you're doing it, because all those things, it means you can't really go out in public and have fun and eat and drink with your friends or be social, because you also don't want to tire your voice out, before a concert. So,
oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. That's true. I guess it's a little bit different if you're playing an instrument, but when you are the instrument, it's got to be a little bit different.
Exactly.
Now you're into the wine thing, you're in the wine shops, and you're in New York in the wine shops, which is a great education because there's access to everything. I mean, people get so bored in New York. They decide one week they're going to be obsessed with one kind of wine and the next they can be obsessed with another because they have that kind of choice. But why did you decide to do the Master of Wine? You already had a master's. And so why the Master of Wine?
As you mentioned, I went all the way through the WSET. I got my diploma. And at that point, I took a break from it. I thought like, oh, I'm a little burnt out with all this study. I just want to, now I just want to sort of, be in this world and not be in the learning world anymore. And then I quickly realized that I was bored.
Yeah.
I've just always been one of those people that has to be like working towards something. I also had a friend, Mary Margaret McCamick, who's now an MW, who had started the program before me. So it was really helpful to have her talk me through it. So that helped me understand like what was involved and why it would be valuable. But I really wanted to have options. At that point, I didn't really know where my wine career was going. And I thought like of all the programs, of all the sort of the things I could do to set myself up for success, it would be this, because it sort of provides a sort of global network of people who are willing to talk with you because you're pursuing this crazy thing. And also because it's very holistic way, it really covers everything about the wine industry, the obvious things like, viticulture and vinification, but then down to, laws and marketing, all the sort of business side of wine and current events, et cetera. So, there's a lot more to it than just the blind tasting element, which is of course really fascinating, but you have to know so much more. So I just thought, it's the perfect, well-rounded way to keep growing.
Why did you do the Master of Wine? We hear so much in the general press about the Master Sommelier program. Mm-hmm. Why did you pursue Master of Wine rather than Master Sommelier, which really is the one that everybody talks about, although the Master of Wine is in my opinion, much more challenging in the sense that it's a
Mm-hmm.
long haul. Like it really is the equivalent of getting a master's degree as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to the master sommelier, which is a bit more pump and dump, let's say.
Yeah, I think for me personally, there are a couple of reasons. One was I wasn't pursuing a career in restaurants. So, for instance, it's the service element is so important. The master sommelier exam makes perfect sense. For me, I knew I was going to be doing other things in the wine business. The master of wine does not involve a service element. However, we have to use more, I would say, like critical thinking versus factual recall. And that really fascinates me, where there's never a question that's like, oh, name all the Grand Crus of such and such. They're going to ask a question where maybe you have to tie together your knowledge of viticulture, of vinification, of laws, of commercial appeal, et cetera, and like actually like form an argument and then defend it and use examples from around the world to really show that you have an understanding. So that was more interesting to me. I would say also something that I appreciate about the Master of Wine program is that it's anonymous. So everything we do is written, whereas the Master Sommelier is verbal. So you're standing in front of people. They know who you are. They know if you're male or female.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
pass is completely subjective.
They know,
And it's a quite political process as well.
Yeah.
But the Master of Wine sounds more like literally a master's degree. When you study a topic, you are spending day in, day out learning, and then you're writing papers and analyzing things versus taking an exam where they're like, just do factual recall, which you can obviously look that up afterwards. You don't actually need to know all that. You just need to know that it exists.
Right.
Kind of the interesting thing about the two exams. One is definitely more academic, I would say, right?
I think so. And again, I have such respect for people who are MSs. I mean, it's a long haul too, and it's extremely rigorous and extremely difficult. But yeah, for me, I liked that. I liked the Master of Wine for the reasons we were discussing. Yeah.
So what's your final paper on?
So I did a historical, legal, and economic analysis of factors affecting owners of vineyards and wineries in Napa Valley.
Oh, interesting. So is that what brought you to Napa?
It isn't, but once I'd already been in Napa since I started the Master of Wine program and prior to that actually, but I definitely wanted to write something about Napa. It's my home. I know so many people there. We work with so many wines from Napa Valley at Wine Access. So I really wanted to write something, and I wanted to write something that hopefully would be relevant and helpful to them, since they are my friends and neighbors.
So are you done with it?
I am done. It is out of my hands. I actually have about a week, and then I find out.
Oh gosh. Well, good luck. I'm sure you made it.
Thank you.
Let's talk about your career in Napa, how you wound up getting to Wine Access. What was your path once you went to Napa? That's quite a big move from New York to Napa.
When I was living in New York, so my husband and I decided we wanted to move, and we did not want to move to another city. So he's a musician, so he actually works in San Francisco at the conservatory, but we decided we were going to make our home in Napa. I was like in New York looking on winejobs.com and,
Yes.
and, sending my resume to people and be nice. And sometimes I get like, oh, let's, can you come by the winery tomorrow? Let's meet. And I'd have to call them and say, well, actually, I'm in Manhattan. I haven't moved there yet, and basically it would be like, okay, thanks anyway, click. So after several weeks of that, I said to my husband, like, I think we just have to go. And I don't know if you've heard this phrase, but like leap and the net will appear.
Yeah.
But I think I just have to go. So I moved to Napa, rented a house without ever seeing it before I showed up.
Wow.
I came out before my husband, and by a couple weeks I had my cat and my laptop and an air mattress, and essentially started over. So like the very first thing I did there was I worked in the tasting room of Mondavi Winery.
Which is we won't discuss some of the quality issues that happened after they sold, but they do a great job with hospitality. And I tell people, if you've never been to Napa before, the first stop you should always make is Mondavi.
Well, I 100% agree. And I mean, all roads in Napa lead back to Robert Mondavi. I mean, he was just so critically important to the region. And it was a great place to learn for that. And something I love to tell people is, I'm working in the tasting room next to Maya Dalla Valle, who's daughter of Naoko, who was also like, obviously her name is on the bottle, but her mom was like, oh no, like you've got to go earn your stripes first. So I started there. I did then move into a buying position at a local retail shop, which originally I was really disappointed at because I had done retail in New York and I was done with it. But it actually gave me a great opportunity to actually meet all these people. You see their names on the bottles, but you don't know what they're actually like as a person. So that gave me the opportunity to meet all the producers and the winemakers. And then that eventually led to my first job at Arietta. So my first winery job, I should say. So I was the first non-cellar employee at Arietta Wines. I got to work, beside Andy Erickson. So like amazing, amazing way to learn. Did a couple other jobs following that, doing sales and marketing for, Donna Estates with Philippe Melka. And so I did that for several years and then got back into buying with Wine Access. It's kind of an interesting hybrid of a role that I do there. Have been there for 3 years and have been the head of wine there for about a year and a half.
Can you talk about what Wine Access is, why you decided to go there, and why it was a good fit for you, and what makes it a little bit different from some of the other companies that sell wine in a similar way?
Absolutely. So, we're a direct-to-consumer national e-com wine retailer. So we have no brick and mortar retail locations. We're all online. We do have a number of SKUs that sort of perennially live on the website where you can kind of just go shop like you would at like a wine.com type of thing. But that's a small part of the business. What we really do is we feature one wine at a time via email. So people refer to it often as like a daily offer type of model. But I'd say, what we focus on specifically is obviously finding the best wines from all around the world at all different price points. But we devote a tremendous amount of time into the content. So we write an original, usually between 500 to 1,000 word piece of content about that wine, all original tasting notes. And we're not just taking things and let's say like Googling them or taking them off of Wikipedia or the winery's website. I'm on the road a tremendous amount of the year, as is the rest of my wine team, in the cellars, walking the vineyards with these people, like really trying to transport the readers on this wine journey with us, to kind of transport people from behind their computer screens to feel like they're on the wine trail with us. So, in a nutshell, that's the majority of our business. But, there's a couple of things that I think, to answer your question, that we do differently. Content, as I mentioned, provenance is another important one. So we guarantee the provenance of the wine. So we're working directly, with the wineries so that there's no question of like, how has this wine been stored? How many times has it been shipped around the country? Did a collector own it first and then they resold it? And what was their cellar condition like? So we guarantee that. We have the most amazing customer service team that's based in Napa, so in our backyard. But then also I think, what I'm most proud of is the wine team. So I oversee 4 other people and we together find the wines that we offer, but we taste every single bottle. So, we're never offering something just like, oh, we got a great deal on closeout. Every single bottle gets tasted by our team. And we have to say, would you stake your reputation on this bottle? And if even one of us says no, then we don't offer it.
Wow.
So it's extremely rigorous selection process. And, what I think also is really special about that team is I think it's the most credentialed wine team in the business by far. I mean, hopefully next week I'll be a Master of Wine. I have another Master of Wine candidate on my team. I have a Master Sommelier, former beverage director of Morimoto Worldwide, also as a sake sommelier. And former beverage director of Ritz-Carlton. So, it's an amazing team and it's not one person's opinion. And I think that's also what is a differentiating factor for us is that as I look around the space, like sometimes it's one person's selection, but this is like, we're all bringing wines, but it has to pass all of our judgment.
So let me ask you this. You said that initially you go out to the vineyards, you figure out for yourself what the story is and the story that you want to tell. So do you taste the wines first and then go out, or do you get the wines and then, I guess I'm trying to figure out what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because the one thing that struck me was, well, what if you really connect with the person and then the wine comes and you're like, that doesn't really fit? Is that a difficult thing to do?
And that happens. And yes, it's difficult. But because it is sort of a combination of our outreach and samples arriving in our office of people that just want us to evaluate their wine and decide. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely had to have those hard conversations with a winemaker where it's like, oh, I really like you, but it's just not going to work. Like it didn't pass our judging panel. So yes, that's
for various
never a call I like to make.
Yeah, of course not. How did you become the head of wine, which is an interesting title? You started out doing as part of the team and then you took the reins.
I did. I did. So I was actually brought in under someone who I'd met through the Master of Wine program. He's a Master of Wine, who was, I was originally on his team. After about a year and a half, he moved on, and our board promoted me to be head of wine. And honestly, it's my dream job. I mean, it's a very sort of odd role in that it's working with the trade in terms of working with, suppliers, but then we're also having to then know how to communicate it to the consumer. So it's sort of a buyer's role, but you're kind of a salesperson. You're judging and evaluating wines all day, but you're also like obviously negotiating things to make sure we have the absolute best, quality to price ratio. So my job there specifically is, I do have these, supplier relationships that I'm maintaining. I'm on the road a lot, gathering content. I oversee the team, and I also oversee the content because, as I mentioned before, it's extremely important to us that we're creating original and interesting content that's not pedantic, but still very educational and really like brings the wine to life. So we have a full-time staff writer, a full-time editor, and then we have about 5 or 6 freelance writers who help us as well. People who write for Food and Wine magazine and Forbes. So it's an incredible group of people that I get to work with.
How do you pick the selections that are going to be the kind of permanent collection or more permanent collection? I really like that aspect of the site, that there are some things that you can just go on the site and buy. One of the challenging things, although it's also very cool that you can have a daily offer, but one of the challenging things is if you miss something, then, for some of these other sites, there's nowhere to go. You just sort of stuck with
exactly.
The offer's over and it's done. How did that format come about? And what do you decide goes there versus somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, great question. So the online store came much later. So that's only been around for a couple years. And really the impetus was exactly what you mentioned, which some of these things are sort of customer favorites. They really want to buy it again. But, the daily offer has closed because our daily offers are only open for 3 days or until the wine sells out. And sometimes the wine sells out in an hour. So we looked at that, what are some of the favorites? And then frankly, we looked at what are the wines that in some cases we're really, really proud of that we were able to find. I think that something that I get a lot of pride from is the people that want to work with us in terms of their caliber. So we did, some of the selection was that. Some of it is frankly if someone just wanders to our site and it's I don't know anything about these people, who are they? We wanted to show some things that we really enjoy and that we're proud of as well.
And it's a variety of price points too, which is really nice for people who want to start out walking and then maybe running, right? You might not want to spend $100 on a bottle, but you have wines that are $20 and $30 and all sorts of price points. Is that something that's a priority for you also?
Absolutely. I mean, our list is really varied, and we have people in 44 states all over the country. So there's definitely sort of a sweet spot in that sort of $30 to $40 range. But, we have people who've never bought a wine over $20. And then we have people who say don't even bother me if it's under 500 because, I'm only interested in.
Yeah, I'd like to know those people so that I could try their wines.
Right. Ask for an invitation to their wine dinners. But yeah, so definitely I wanted to have a range of price points, but also maybe most importantly is things that show great typicity for the region, for instance, great quality price ratio, but that if you're someone who's I've never had a Hunter Valley Semillon. What's that all about? You're going to find an example that will really help you understand that place and that style.
Well, and that's another thing that I want to bring up is the access portion, because there are some wines that are hard to find. Hunter Valley Semillon is a great example. I just had somebody on the show. We were talking about, unfortunately, the fires in the Hunter Valley. She was not affected at Tranquil Vale, which is they have a really, really tiny operation, but they make this divine, amazing Semillon, not available in the United States. That's a hard wine to find. So how do you pick those kinds of gems that maybe aren't as intuitive? Or how are you giving people access to things they can't have elsewhere?
So a lot of that is the sort of outreach that we're doing, a lot of the travel where we definitely offer some wines that are more mainstream, but we really try to find those little hidden gems. And a lot of that is through the travel. I was with my CEO about a year ago, and we were in Champagne and visiting some of our producers that we work with, Billicart, Bollinger, et cetera. And we had a little extra time and just said hey, let's ask the locals, who's really just crushing it here that maybe doesn't have representation in the United States. And we show up on these people's doorstep, and I really think they thought they were getting punked. And, sure enough, we taste through and they're like, oh yeah, Kermit Lynch was almost brought us in, but he had too many champagne producers, so he didn't. And we tasted the wines and I said, I really like this, but I think our customers' palate, they'd like a little bit of a lower dosage. Could you do a custom dosage for our members? And they did it. And so now it's the exclusive place you can buy. It's called a Brugnon Champagne. So finding those hidden gems is really something that we're committed to. I think also just through the content, maybe helping people feel comfortable trying those too is really key. And it comes back to, all the time we invest in sort of telling the story of the place. And sometimes it's an easy story to tell and sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, but we always do it.
Do you do direct importing also?
We do, yes.
Oh, very cool. Yes. So that's part of the access and wine access, that there's some things that you really aren't going to find anywhere else because you're importing them.
Exactly. Yeah. And that champagne's a great example.
Absolutely. When you are working with these people, is it important for you to have a connection with the winemaker and think, these are pretty good people and we're going to work with them, especially for some of the less mainstream products?
I've always thought that you can sort of sense the ego of the person in the glass. so it's always a plus.
We could really dig into that. I'm not going to go there.
I think it's always a plus when they're generally a nice person. But I'd say, what, the majority of people, I have to say, who work in wine are really wonderful, gracious people, because as you know, all too well, like, it's not easy. There's Mother Nature. And like you just mentioned, the fires and all these things that people have to take in consideration. You have to kind of really want to be there to be in the wine industry. So most of the people I meet are actually really, really fantastic.
Yeah, the producers are definitely a humbled bunch, right? Especially the winemakers, I would say.
They are, yes.
So let's get to the notes and the things that you pull out that you think are important. So let's say that you're writing a note and you think to yourself, these are the things that I find really interesting. So here's kind of a counterpoint to you being a master of wine. Your level of education and your team's level of education is likely a lot higher than what the average person's education level is about wine and what they might want to know. How do you figure out the right balance to make sure that people are connecting and that you're not going too far? You know what I'm saying?
I totally do. Yeah, I think, sort of two parts to the answer. One is, we're trying to provide, aside from like what we're writing about the wines, we always send out things like serving temperature, cellar time, food pairings. So things that, anyone can digest very easily.
Bottle the other hangers, is, right?
Exactly.
Those things are very cool. So what Wine Access provides is when you order it, you get this hanger that you can put on the bottle. And when you lay down the bottle, it's there. Then when you pull it out, you don't have to remember or take out papers. It's just on the bottle, which is very cool.
Exactly. What we do is, and what I think is important for the consumer is, because we do taste everything, the thing about wines is they also evolve. And wines, when they're released and you read the tasting notes from the winery, if we're offering it 10 years later, it doesn't taste like that anymore.
Not at all.
So that's right.
Sometimes for good and sometimes for bad.
Well, that's just it. And that's aside from just tasting for quality, we're also tasting for how's it drinking right now, because we want people to know. So, that's something that we do for every wine. But, I think your question is valid. I think, we have this amazing team, but what we focus on every day is really like, it's our job to be the advocate for the consumer. So we're never trying to talk about things in a way that's over people's head. We also want to be interested and keep the interest of our really knowledgeable wine members. But it's something that it's not easy, honestly. And we work on it every day.
It's always a hard balance to try to make sure that people are getting the right amount of information. I struggle with that too, is just to not give too much, but also give enough. I almost want to do a paragraph of like, okay, if you really want to get into it. In fact, it's funny. I wound up doing that, portions of that in the Wine for Normal People book, because when I got to Germany, for instance, I just put this arrow that said, skip here if you don't want to know anymore, if that's enough for you.
I love that.
Because my dad, who was my reader for the book, he's a little bit more knowledgeable than some, but he's pretty normal. And he was like, you're going to have to write something like, don't read this if you're not interested in German wine.
And no, I think that's great. And, we do try to lay out the content in a way that's like, if you just want to skim it, you can get the gist really quickly. If you want to dive deep, that's also there for you too.
Does the content evolve, or do you have consumer feedback, or how do you work that to make sure that you are getting that right balance in terms of really valuing? I know you really value the buyers. So how do you incorporate that and still maintain what you want to do?
We definitely get feedback from our members. As I mentioned, like our member services team is based right there in Napa. So people will call in, and our wine team works out of the Napa office too. And sometimes, they'll wander over and be like, hey, I have this person on the phone that really wants to know such and such. So, we get a lot of feedback, and we look at everything. Because again, it's our job to listen to the consumer, not to tell them what they like, right? So we're constantly evaluating that. I mean, I'd say something that we've also invested in really heavily is actually getting out from behind the computer screen. So while we don't have a brick and mortar location, we've been doing a number of events around the country for our members where it gives us, the opportunity to actually connect with our consumers, but it gives them the opportunity to connect with the suppliers. Because something else that we, is one of our, our pillars is connecting people and place through wine. So we've done events just recently with like Alfred Tesseron, proprietor of Ponte Canet, where we brought a group of Bordeaux collectors in a room with him, and they all just got to sit down and talk about the wine. We did the same thing with Saskia Rothschild from Lafite. We just did one with Matt Duncan, third generation family owner of Silver Oak. So it really allows us the opportunity not just to sort of sit behind this digital barrier, but to get out there and actually talk to people and hear like, what are they asking? Because then when we write the content, it's not about like, well, this was the vintage and the stuff that you would be able to predict, but it's like this, sometimes the questions they ask are so insightful, and it definitely guides our content.
What's an example of one of those kinds of questions?
When Saskia, she was Rothschild, she was one of our like the favorite people that we've interviewed. But I think somebody asked her sort of the challenges of being a young woman, running this huge empire. And like, she was extremely candid about that. And, just led to really funny stories too about like, things that maybe didn't go quite right for her, or unexpected pairings even, where somehow she got on a tangent about that she likes to drink Sauterne and oysters. But it's kind of like, which I've been meaning to try ever since then. I still haven't, because I love oysters and I love Sauterne, but I've never put them on the table at the same time. But just sort of stuff where you're like, it's not necessarily what you would think, people want to talk about, but it's those little tidbits that actually like bring wines to life for people.
Yeah, the personality of the person behind it, as opposed to just the bottle or the fanciness or the price or whatever it is, that the status.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is, some people are status buyers and they like that, but a lot of people actually want to know what's behind it.
Yeah. And I mean, we were chatting with Matt Duncan, and he's recently married, and like, well, what do you drink at your wedding? Like just stuff that's just, you're not going to be able to, again, you can navigate to their website, but you're not going to be able to learn things like that.
So you've been in the industry for a long time. It's changed over the years. What's the place for direct-to-consumer wine buying? And what do you think that you can do, or that you are doing, that's kind of breaking through with drinkers? Because there's been a huge pivot towards people buying wine online. They feel more comfortable with it. God knows, I do it all the time. I'm a huge advocate of it, because it is great to support your local place, but they don't have everything that you need. What has been the shift in the wine industry over the years? In your 3 years at Wine Access, have you seen any changes, and what do you see for the future?
Great question. I think one of the things was that you really hit the nail on the head, is that there's so much available online. I mean, I'm definitely an online shopper myself, not just for wine, but for almost everything these days. But I think what's that resulted in is it's sort of a blessing and a curse, in that there's so much out there. There's so many people in the space, and there's so much information out there that it can be hard to figure out who to trust and where's the best resource to buy it. So I've definitely, in terms of the business side, seen that, the space has gotten very crowded. And I think from the consumer side, then that's what I hear also. It's like, well, how do I know? And while all this information should be helpful, sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so, I also think that's what we take a lot of pride in, is sort of taking the guesswork out of people, tasting the wines, writing about them with all of our, original content and notes, to take the guesswork out. I mean, we also offer the provenance guarantee, but also just a guarantee that if you buy something and our description wasn't accurate, like we'll give you a credit, like no questions asked. It doesn't have to be like, oh, the bottle was corked or something that we can't control. It's just like, hey, did we do our jobs? I think that's from the consumer side. That's something we take really seriously. But I think also like a shift is that people, they want to buy in a different way. I think that for a long time, the baby boomer generation, they were very much a like wine club type consumer, or a mailing list type consumer where you get the same wines, you get shipments from the same wineries throughout the year, and you're very loyal to that brand. But people want to try a lot of different things these days. They want to be told when they can buy things and how much they can buy. And, they're sort of like, I think you use this phrase, right? Like promiscuous drinkers, which I think is great because that's the way to learn your palate. So I've definitely seen that shift over the years. But I think also in that with so much variety, how can we empower the consumer to feel comfortable trying new things and to trust their own palates? And that's where I feel like I've mentioned it a number of times, but I do think it's just so important that providing notes or, information that's accurate that you can trust is key. Because what I'd really love ultimately is to have more people just excited about wine and trusting their own palates. Maybe becoming less reliant on numerical scores, for instance, to make their buying selections. So anything I can do to get people, and anything we can do at Wine Access to get people excited and empowered about wine is what we're focused on.
I mean, you and I had a conversation about this before, but I think that one of the major important things is not whether we like the wine, but whether it's a good representation of whatever region it is, and then for people to think critically about whether or not they like it. And I think that is something that it's true that in the past, the wine industry really has not wanted people to do. Nobody has,
right.
They, instead of telling you it's okay if I think that wine sucks and you think it's okay, as long as it's made well. So there's a difference between wine that's not made well and wine that's made well. And I think having the breadth on your team, I'm sure that not all of you like the same wines, right?
Exactly.
Personally.
No, exactly. I mean, you're 100% correct. And I think that's also the strength of having this team, because we're wine professionals. So it is our job to sort of take our personal opinion out of it. But then, inevitably someone's going to like a category more than the next person. But
you can't take yourself completely out of it. But you can say, I really don't like oaky Chardonnay, but for an oaky Chardonnay, that's made really well.
And that's a conversation that we have all the time. Yeah. Like if this is this for a consumer that likes this style, will this like surprise and delight them and over deliver? Whether it's our
something different is the other thing, right? Will it be similar enough, but maybe different enough? Could it open them into something else, which I think is always the goal, is to what else could you try that would be really amazing and different? And so this is not a knock necessarily on the wine clubs, but I get this question constantly about wine clubs.
Sure.
What do you think about wine clubs? Should I join a wine club? Should I join the New York Times, NPR, Wall Street Journal, whatever wine club? So to that question, and again, I guess I'm asking you more as the master of wine and also somebody who works in this business, what would you say to somebody who was thinking about joining a wine club as opposed to shopping as a member of Wine Access?
No, it's a really valid question. And I have to say, it comes back to that kind of finding someone that you trust, right? Because I've definitely seen a wide range of quality out there where, I mean, I'll just be honest, some people use clubs as sort of a way to just get rid of excess inventory.
It's a dumping ground for sure. I mean, I worked for a big winery. We were always looking for places like that.
Exactly. Like, how do we get rid of these last 30 cases or something? So I totally understand the hesitation on people's parts. I'd say like what we do, we do have a club, but all the wines go through our same judging panel. So it's not just sort of, what can we find to fill the gap? And we actually source specifically towards a theme. So for instance, this coming quarter, our theme is high elevation and hillside vineyards. So we're using it not only as a way to get people learning and trying new wines, but also like educate them about why that matters. So, we did a whole video and write up about like, well, what are the considerations? Like, why should I care if this is a hillside vineyard, and how does that taste in the glass? So I think, fortunately, it sort of depends on where you're shopping. But I think with the right wine partner, it could be really educational and really fun too, especially for people who maybe don't have the time or are still learning about wine, don't quite know what to try. I think it can be really easy. And also like, it's such an easy gift. It's like my favorite gift to give to people too, because it's like, it keeps on giving throughout the year. And again, it's a way to get people excited about wines.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's about how the person who is supplying those wines is looking at it and whether or not there's enough variety and whether you do get the sense that it is a dumping ground versus something like what Wine Access does where everything is a deliberate decision. And I
Exactly.
think ultimately that is why I really like you guys. I like working with you because it is clear that everything is deliberate and the wines are picked with the idea in mind that these are really some of the best examples that you can get. And there's value, good price to quality ratio.
Thank you. Yes. And I mean, we also offer for our wine club members a, discount of anything else they want to buy, but something else we do to kind of be a little bit different and engaging with our wine club members is we do shoot a video every single time of the selections where our wine team is tasting them, talking about them, their experience with them. And so if someone literally wants to try that wine at home, watching us have a conversation about it, they can sort of have this more interactive experience.
That's fantastic. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. I am sure that the next time we speak to you, you will be a master of wine. Exciting for you. Congratulations. You. Long path, double masters, right? And
right.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. We can find Wine Access at wineaccess.com/normal. With that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.